once you feel His touch, His love, your life will never be the same. Beautiful, gifted singer, songwriter, speaker, author, Kathy Troccoli has served on the mission field all over the world, performing before millions for decades. Her numerous accolades include 24 recordings, 18 #1 radio hits, 2 Grammy nominations, and the list goes on and on. Today, God is taking her down a new path, songs and sparks, the power of the spoken word with song, to let His light shine through. This is her story. This is today's Nashville. This is faith. Beautiful Kathy Troccoli, I am so honored to sit down with you. I have been a huge fan of yours since, I think, the 90s. And what a blessing it is to be with you.
Thank you. It really is fun to just sit down in my home and have an interview. It feels homey and warm and sweet, so I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for inviting me into your gorgeous home.
Well,
how long have you been in Nashville?
Well, on and off for years and years. I was moved to Nashville in the 80s, believe it or not, by Dan Harrell, Mike Blanton, who managed Amy Grant, Michael Smith. They found me in New York and moved me down to try to get a record deal for me. So I lived with the Grant family for a little while, and then I left Christian music and then came back. Still lived in New York, was kind of going back and forth, and then probably the last 20 years have been
20 years. Let's go back to New York. From the very beginning, you were born in Brooklyn.
Born in Brooklyn, yeah.
Tell me about your family growing up and your mom and dad and everything that took you from Brooklyn back to here.
Point A to point B to Z, yeah. It's a long time. Well, born in Brooklyn, and big, as you can imagine, not in the internal Italian family, but external, lots of aunts and uncles and cousins. And so my parents took me and my sister out to Long Island, 50 miles outside of New York City, and we were on the south shore of Long Island. I was 2 miles from the ocean. That's why living in Nashville, I always say when we have those hot summers, gosh, I miss the beach. And people go, miss the beach? And I'll always go, Long Island's an island. And they go, oh yeah, we forget, you know. So I moved to Long Island in the 60s, and we were around my mother's family, her sisters, uncles, cousins. So that's where I was brought up. My family were my cousins were my friends until probably high school, where I branched out. But it was always about family there, you know.
What was high school like? Were you already thinking about a music career, or?
Well, what happened was, you remember the Tapestry record, right? Carole King.
Mm-hmm.
Musically, I was weaned on the big band, the Tony Bennett's, the Frank Sinatras, being the Italian family. But then at that time, in the 70s, it was James Taylor, it was Carole King, it was Carly Simon. So I had Carole King's Tapestry record on, and I was singing, so far away, doesn't anybody? And my father, at the time, he passed away at 46 years old, but he knocked on my door, and he said, Kathleen, sing that for Daddy again. And I was just singing to the record. He says, it sounds so good. So he kind of discovered my voice. And then I had a Spanish teacher. I would kind of start singing with the guitar, and I loved her and would meet her on lunch hour instead of being with my friends. And she wanted people to hear my voice. So she did a variety show around me in 10th grade. And I remember wearing a Carole King's Tapestry shirt. I sat at the edge of the stage. I only knew like 3 songs on the guitar. She had other people, but she wanted to introduce me to my peers. And from that moment on, I was like the singer in high school. I did everything musical. So it was really, and I played the flute too in the marching band, believe it or not, at that time. And I used to, side note, used to lie about my age, 15, 16 years old, and I started singing in the clubs in the tri-state area.
At 16?
16, believe it or not, my mother was so strict, but she was like that Italian mom. Kathleen, you were born to sing. You were born to sing. So whatever, you know, had to do with my voice. So I went, and it was really interesting because You know, I was singing in that clanking, drinking, drunk atmosphere, but I was singing, you know, embrace me, my sweet embraceable you, all the standards, you know, and then I'd come Wednesday nights, Friday, Saturday nights, and then I'd go to school.
Your voice is just amazing. Were you a believer at this time, or?
No, I was what I call a creaster, Christmas and Easter.
CEO, Christmas, Easter only. You're a
Oh,
CEO.
CEO. I haven't heard, can I steal that
Yeah,
from
you
you?
can take that.
Yeah, I mean, we had crucifix, you know, the whole Italian, I joke about it, you know, in some houses it was in every room above the toilet, but it was seriously for good luck. There wasn't a concept of, it was a religion, it was a religious God. It wasn't a personal God. And that's all I knew, really. But I had a sense, like even when I received my Holy Communion, I was in 3rd grade, and I remember just looking at the wall at the church, you know, as God woos us. I think back at some of those, and I remember as a little girl going, God, are you here? Where are you? Are you real? That kind of thing. And so, you know, he answers our prayer even when we don't really know what we're praying.
Yes,
He answers.
he does. After 16, going into the clubs and singing, what happened after that?
Well, I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to just be a singer. And my mother was a widow, and my mother was also concerned about me not getting an education. So I decided, I went to Berkeley Jazz School in Boston and went there for just a year, and then came back home. And that summer, I was working a summer job. I wasn't making enough money in clubs, and it was at a community pool. And I was in the office, and a girl was reading her Bible every single day during her lunch hour, and I'd never seen anyone read the Bible before. I mean, it was really literally on an end table, in a living room, in a bedroom. It was for the holy people. And she read it, but not only read it, I could, you know, that aroma of Christ. She had it. I didn't know what I was smelling, but it was Jesus. And so through the course of the summer, she really kind of led me to the Lord and invited me to her church, prayed the prayer of inviting Jesus in my heart with her youth pastor.
I love that.
And I was 20 years old.
20 years old. You faced a lot of trials, though. You were talking about your father, your mom being a widow, and you lost your dad at a young age, right? Were you a teenager?
Yeah, he was 40. Yeah, I was 15, just turning 16. And so it was clearly, as you can imagine, pretty traumatic at that age to lose the male figure in your household. And so, you know, it was a big blow. I was a lot closer to my mom, but my dad was a sweet man, a kind man, but it was still a huge loss for me at a time where I needed a father.
You know, Kathy, we're going to talk about it in a minute, but God has done and has taken you on an amazing journey. And we're going to talk about it right after the break.